Happy Monday to all two of. This will be fun.
That was me. You probably recognize the handwriting by now, but anyway.
I didn't, put your name on it, turn it in, and I'll get it fixed.
Maybe they got confused about the wrong. He only told us about 3 times.
Sucks to be them.
Hey, look, we both decided to give ourselves a buzz at the same time.
Well, now that I'm finally feeling better, I meant to do this, for the past month, but I've been sick, so, If I did, it makes my life easier.
I was just saying because, I thought Friday was the last. Last Friday.
I
think so. Whatever.
don't know, it was not an option for me.
Yeah, I know, same.
We're going to continue our study of trig. I think we left off. Yeah, we defined what the 6 trig functions were. Right, on the plane. And we found trig functions of several angles, quote unquote angles. Right, we're going to continue that, except we're going to really test ourselves. What number is this? This is 11. Find values of cosine and tangent given that sine is 8/17 and theta is located in quadrant 1. Okay. Well, what do we know? How is sine defined?
Y over R.
So we know y, right? What is y?
8, right?
What is r?
17.
So we can easily figure out x. Remember, r is the square root of x squared plus y squared. Solve for x. I'm not going to write that. I'm going to do it this way. You can easily see absolute value of x is the square root of r squared minus y squared. We're located in quadrant 1. Sine of x in quadrant 1 is what?
Positive.
So we just take the positive square root, right? $17 squared. Okay, 100
Plus 9, I know that.
340. So that's 440 plus 49 would be 489.
No, I can't. 20.
Oh no, 70 is 140. I'm sorry. So
289.
240, 289.
Yeah, 2.
Minus 64. Square root of that.
Oh. That on purpose.
R is 15. What's cosine of theta? Which is what?
So 15, 17.
What's tangent of theta? There you go. Find values of sine and tangent given cosine of theta is 5/6. What two values then do we know if we know cosine?
R
What is x?
5,
What is r?
6.
We can easily find y, right? Absolute value of y. The square root of r squared minus x squared. (36 minus 25). Absolute value of y is square root of 11. Absolute value of y is root 11. What is y?
Positive root 11.
Is that your only option?
Well, negative root 11.
Could be positive or negative. Because we're not told where theta is located. Where could theta be?
First or fourth, right?
Cosine's positive, so we're either in quadrant 1 or quadrant 4. If theta is located in quadrant 1, then what would y be?
Positive.
We want what? Sine and tangent? What would sine theta be in this case?
Quadrant 1. Sign is positive.
No, so what's the value of sine?
Oh, y over r.
Which is
Uh, Root 11 over 6.
And what would tangent be?
Root 11 over 5.
If instead theta is located in quadrant 4, then what is y?
Uh, I guess it has to be negative root 11, right?
What would sine be in this case? And what about tangent? Yeah. Sine and cosine given that tangent is negative 3 over 4. What values do we know?
Well, there's two pairs of X and Y, right? It's 3 and negative 4, or negative 3 and 4.
So what values does that give us?
Well, it's the X and Y values. Right, the tangent.
Right, but
So
you
it-
just said there's 2 options for each one, right?
All right, so either Y is 3 and X is negative 4, or Y is negative 3 and X is 4.
There's an easier way of representing that.
Oh.
If x is plus or minus 3, how else can you say that?
Well, absolute values.
What's r?
It's gonna be 5. Right?
And it's just the square root of 3 squared plus 4 squared. Doesn't matter if it's plus or minus, because if you square it, it becomes positive anyway.
Wait, how do we get that again? Because we squared, 3 and 4, right?
Let's remember how R is defined. Distance between the origin and the point. So it's square root of x squared plus y squared. Doesn't matter if the value is positive or negative, right? Because once you square it, it becomes positive. So 3 squared and negative 3 squared are both the same, they're 9. Where's theta located?
Second and fourth.
We're either in quadrant 2 or quadrant 4. If we're in quadrant 2, what's x, what's y?
X will be negative, Y will be positive. So negative 3. And 4.
Then what is sine of theta? And what is cosine?
Like this.
If instead we're in quadrant 4, what is x and what is y?
Everything's just gonna be reversed, right? Gonna be,
What do you mean reversed?
well, the signs, all the signs will be the opposite.
They're saying that?
Yeah. Now it'll be negative 4.
Like that?
Think so?
Good to me.
Oh. That's the word way. Is that good? Like the teacher say, are you sure about that?
I was gonna say worse yet. Cop goes, "Are you sure you didn't do anything wrong?" When they already know you did. We'll never admit to it though.
My favorite was always, is there anything in this car I should know about? Now's your chance to tell me. And then they arrest them anyway.
Yeah, if they ever do that to me, I'm just gonna make sure I have a baby diaper in the car, and I'm gonna go, "Yeah, I have a deadly weapon." Find sine of theta given cosine is negative 4/5 and tangent of theta is greater than 0. X would be negative 4, right? R would be 5. So absolute value of y would have to be 3. If tangent of theta is greater than 0, where would theta be located? Where else?
3, right? Since the cosine is negative.
But we're told cosine of theta is negative 4/5. That means cosine is less than 0. So where is theta located? For cosine less than 0.
That would be quad 3, right?
Where else is cosine 0?
Well, 0 or less than 0?
Less than 0.
Cosine, 2.
Tangent being greater than 0 means we're in 1 or 3. Cosine being negative means we're in 2 or 3. There's only one quadrant that they have in common. That's quadrant 3. So theta has to be in quadrant 3. It's the only possibility. Which means y is what? And then what is sine of theta? Determine the values of cosine and tangent. If sine is equal to m over n is less than 0, and m is less than 0. If m over n is less than 0, and m is also less than 0, what do we know about n? That makes sense. Sine is y over r. That means n is r, and r has to be positive. If n wound up being less than 0, then we would have no solutions, because it would just not be possible. Perfect. Now we know y is m. We know r is n. Which means the absolute value of x would be the square root n squared minus m squared. We know that sine of theta is less than 0. So where is theta going to be located? Well, can't be both. Let's say or the fourth. Theta can't be in two quadrants at once. So we're either going to be in 3 or 4. If we're in quadrant 3, then what do we know about cosine theta? What's the sign of it? And what about tangent? Cosine theta. Making this more difficult than it needs to be.
Square root n squared. Squared over.
N is positive, right?
Yeah.
Square root of n squared minus m squared is what?
X.
Sign of it. Is it positive or negative? It's always positive. That makes cosine positive. That's a problem.
Quadrant 4.
Cosine's supposed to be negative. Right. What you gave me is positive. Absolute value of x is the square root of n squared minus m squared, right? Which means x could be plus or minus that. Remember that, that's the absolute value definition. So that's why I can just throw in a negative. In this case, x would be negative root n squared minus m squared because we're in quadrant 3.
You get to pick and choose which one goes with what you.
Well, you don't get to pick and choose, right? Where you're located determines which one it is.
Wherever you're looking.
But how did, How do we know it's not quadrant 4?
Because I'm saying if it's quadrant 3,
Then,
right, then this has to be the case. So really, I'm looking at what are the values for quadrant 3? Just like I did in the previous ones, right? I looked at each quadrant individually. That's what we're doing here.
so we haven't even gotten to quadrant.
Not yet, not yet. What would tangent of theta be? Does that make sense? Why do you say no?
Doesn't one have to be negative or one has to be positive?
Right?
Because the 10 has to, well, that ends up being positive. No, that ends up being negative. The 10 theta, right, ends up being negative.
Why?
Because the negative outside, so we probably don't even need the negative.
But what's M?
It's greater than. No,
Well, M has to be
Oh,
negative.
M is, yeah.
M is negative. So you have negative times a negative, which is positive. This makes sense. Okay, that negative does throw a lot of people off. You would go, oh, you look at that quickly and go, tangent's negative. That doesn't make any sense, but it does because M is also negative. If instead we're in quadrant 4, then what does cosine of theta have to be? Positive or negative? And what about tangent?
Negative.
So what would cosine of theta be in quadrant 4?
The root n squared minus n squared over n.
Does that make sense?
That's positive anyway.
It's positive or positive, right? And what about tangent of theta?
Just plain old m. The root.
Does that make sense?
So it's okay to have a radical in the denominator then?
Mhm.
Don't have, thank God. You know, wouldn't do much good to try to rationalize it.
Does that tangent make sense? Why?
It's supposed to be negative quadrant 4,
Right?
and the M is negative. And the bottom will be positive, so it'll be negative.
This is negative, so that makes sense. I have a negative divided by a positive, which is negative.
So it could be in either quadrant.
Could be in either one. Without further information, there's no way to know. Questions on trigonometry in the plane?
Oh, for 13, we have X and Y. 14, that's where I got the idea from, but I think I just missed it earlier.
Yeah. Triangle trigonometry. So this is used when your angle is acute. What does that mean? Do you remember?
90 degrees.
Which is what
Less
in
than pi
radians?
over 4. Pi over 2.
When your angle is less than pi over 2. In other words, quadrant 1. This is right triangle trigonometry. Right triangle trigonometry is actually very useful. So I'm sure you've heard of some of these problems, right? You have a building, you know how high the building is. You know the angle of the sun, you want to determine the length of the shadow. That forms a right triangle. Right triangle trigonometry. Or you know the length of the shadow and the height of the building. You want to determine at what angle the sun is. That's again right triangle trigonometry. A lot of models involve this. Let's say there's our angle theta. Remember, hypotenuse is always the longest side of the triangle, which happens to be the side that's across from the right angle. Call this opposite. Call this adjacent. So there's a few laws that we need to keep in mind. First, sum of the angles of right triangle is what? 180 what?
Degrees.
Which is pi radians. That's only if we're dealing with Cartesian. Hate to break it to you, but we live on a spherical planet. So actually, the sum of the angles of right triangle are not necessarily 180 degrees.
270.
Right, but that's spherical geometry, which means spherical trigonometry, and that's a whole other beast. For our purposes, we're going to assume 180 degrees. Second, probably the most famous relation when it comes to right triangles. which is called what?
Pythagorean theorem. I almost named my cat Pythagoras. The pith for short was not nice, so I call him Archimedes.
I was gonna name my son Fubini. After Fubini's theorem, just because I like the name. Yeah,
What's your name?
my wife wasn't going for that.
Yes. Be a good cat name, a dog name. Maybe not a kid name though. Babini?
Well, someone's name. Sum of the square of the legs is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. That just means length. So length of A. O for opposite equals the length of H squared. All right, you probably see it as A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Where they represent, where little a represents the length of one of the legs, little b represents the length of another leg, and little c represents the length of the hypotenuse. That's going to be important. Now for the trig functions. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. Cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. Cotangent is adjacent over opposite.
They still use SOHCAHTOA anymore, or is that considered?
I actually never even learned that one.
Really?
Yeah, I never learned SOHCAHTOA.
Anybody in here ever learn SOHCAHTOA?
I did learn SOHCAHTOA as a child.
SOHCAHTOA were the first three?
Yes.
I learned it as a sentence instead.
It might be cultural appropriation at this point.
Was that first one again? Like his little
Sine.
SIN.
SIN.
He got had. Yeah, it's dope. Thank you.
Love right triangle trigonometry. By the way, if you set up your problem in the coordinate plane, you should recognize you also can form a right triangle out of that. Just keep in mind the solution you get is always dealing with an acute angle. Right, so the direct conversion only works in quadrant 1. For quadrant 2, 3, and 4, you have to do some manipulations to get it to work. Bless you.
Thank you.
We're given a triangle ABC. We're asked to find the trigonometric functions of the acute angles of the right triangle, of which there are two. I think they did. Yeah, we're going to do this. Doesn't matter. Right, the vertex they always use as the angle. So if angle A and angle B, and angle C is, of course, the right angle. Sine of A is what? Well, it's opposite over hypotenuse. The length opposite of A, 7. Hypotenuse is always the longest length, 25. Cosine of A. It's the leg adjacent to the angle, 24, over hypotenuse. Tangent of A, opposite over adjacent. Secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. Cosecant hypotenuse over opposite. Cotangent adjacent over opposite. Sine of B, opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine of B, adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent of B, opposite over adjacent. Secant of B, hypotenuse over opposite. Cosecant hypotenuse over opposite. I think it said secant what was hypotenuse over opposite. I meant hypotenuse over adjacent. Cosecant hypotenuse over opposite. Cotangent adjacent over opposite. Right triangle trigonometry gives us a couple properties of trig functions. Sine of pi over 2 minus theta is the same as cosine of theta. Cosine of pi over 2 minus theta is the same as sine of theta. Those are usually the two that we look at. Could also do tangent of pi over 2 minus theta is cotangent theta, right? And you can find relations of the others. All right, cotangent of pi over 2 minus theta would be tangent of theta. Secant pi over 2 minus theta is cosecant of theta, and then cosecant of pi over 2 minus theta would be secant of theta. Again, it's typically just these two that we use. And that's proven using right triangle trigonometry by observation. We'll also be able to prove that when we look at the sum difference identities. Yes, sum difference. I think. Or is it product of sum? One of the identities we're going to be learning. Then we'll be able to prove it analytically. Find the values of the trigonometric functions of the acute angles of the right triangle with height 2 and hypotenuse 2 root 5. Better. Hypotenuse is 2 root 5. Height is 2. What's the missing leg? Like, what's its length? Because we need it. What is it? I can't read lips. I'm blind.
It's a 4-letter word starting with F.
Well, there's
Okay.
some of them.
Is it 4?
Well, no, you tell me.
Well, I'm using Pythagorean theorem.
How'd you get it?
2 squared plus x squared equals 2 root 5 squared.
So that missing length,
2 root 5 squared is gonna be 20. Well, equals root 2 squared plus x squared. Wow. Oh, okay, well, yeah, that,
Oh, that's a good-
yeah.
This is answering my question.
no question. Missing leg is length 4. So the length is 4. Or base, I think they call it. Base is 4. Right? A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Then A would be the square root of C squared minus B squared. Right? Pythagorean theorems, a necessity. They want the trig functions of both acute angles. Call one of them theta, it's called the other one phi. What's sine of theta?
Over 2 root 5, which is 1 over root 5. Do you have to rationalize that denominator?
You can leave as 1 over root 5. Cosine of theta. Was it?
Gonna be 4 over 2 root 5, right? So it's gonna be 2 root 5. No, wait, what the hell am I doing? 4, that, 2 over root 5, jeez. Of course.
What is tangent of theta? Secant of theta.
Over 2.
Cosecant. Tangent. Oh, cotangent, sorry. What's sine of phi?
Downloading game on your phone.
No, it's an alert for this class. I don't know why you're alerting me when I'm in class. Already here.
So now that's gonna be 2 over root 5.
Cosine of phi.
1 over root 5.
Tangent of phi.
Two.
Secant phi.
Five.
Cosecant.
Same as the secant of the other one, right? So it's gonna be root 5 over 2.
I have a question, I'm sorry. Are we taking another place today? Like at the end? Alright, so my car window like doesn't roll up. And I'm kind of scared I'm gonna get robbed. What do you think I'm doing here? Just waiting out extra 15?
That's up to you.
Cause I feel like I have a good grasp on what you're trying to send over here, you know what I'm saying?
That's like I said, that's up to you.
Is it cool though?
Yeah, I'm not holding you hostage.
I'm not trying to be that guy, but like. I'm driving on the highway yesterday, I'm like, can my window roll up? It's like, right. I was like,
Cotangent of phi. Now we're gonna get like a monsoon or something,
1 over tangent.
that's what I'm saying.
which is
Half.
The fee, we're looking at it from a different,
from here.
from there, right?
Yep.
So 2 square root 5 would be our base, or would it still be the H and O and everything?
Thank you.
Right, it would stay the same, right?
Well, hypotenuse never changes. It's always the longest side, which is always the one directly opposite of square root of the right angle. So if you're looking here, what's your opposite over hypotenuse?
Okay,
What's your adjacent to?
yeah, so that's one of my questions.
It's still defined the same way, but now your opposite side's different if you're looking at a different angle.
Yeah, it makes sense, because I was like, how are we getting different numbers?
Given that sine of A is 3/7, find the trigonometric functions of the acute angle A. That loss of generality, we can choose that to be angle A. So given that sine is 3/7, what do we know?
O is 3.
What is O in this case? You say shorter one. This is not drawn to scale.
Just the one on the right.
The height. Right?
Height. Yeah, exactly. That's the,
So this would be base, height, hypotenuse. What else do we know? So what's the base? Two root 10. So sine of A is 3/7. That one was given. You better get that one right. What's cosine of A?
So,
Tangent. Secant.
inverse of the cosine.
Be careful when you say inverse.
Okay, how about the cosine upside down?
What's
that
that upside
one
down
up?
mean?
No, the reciprocal?
Reciprocal.
Oh, yeah, of course not the inverse, the reciprocal. See, I just think secant is almost, SEC is almost COS backwards. So I just do.
The inverse of cosine is something completely different,
Yes, I realize that. Shame on me.
which we're going to be learning.
But I find that flipping the three fractions makes for a nice second half of this exercise.
What's a cosecant? It's cotangent. Which is what? You know your trig functions, you only need to find two of them.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're signing.
you can get the other four just from those two. Which, by the way, is typically how I do trig. Unless they only want a specific one. Trigonometric functions of the acute angle B, given that tangent of B is 1.5. Without loss of generality, let's pick that to be our angle B. So what do we know? What's the height?
You know, the opposite and the adjacent.
Right, which is, but so we know base and height. What's the base?
This would be 3, right? And the height would be 2. You get 3 over 2, 1.5.
Not the only way you could represent it. If you stick with what he was doing, you could also do this if you wanted to. Right. Or doesn't matter as long as when you do base divided by height, you get 1.5. It's valid. Easiest one to work with is probably this. Right, 1.5 is 3 over 2. Base of 3, height of 2. What's the hypotenuse? What's the sine of B? What is cosine?
Are you over 2? No, 2. So,
What is tangent?
Told us that.
What is secant?
No, wait, yeah, root 13 over 2.
What is cosecant?
$13 over 3.
What is cotangent?
And we got square root 13 because we did the a squared plus b squared equals c squared.
Yep.
Nope, it's just from Pythagorean theorem.
And we just did a plus b, which would be 3 and 2, give 13.
Well, 3 squared plus 2 squared.
Yeah. I'm just,
Mm-hmm.
And so c squared has to be 13.
we'll have to get the interior by itself and the square, like it's gonna be squared, and you have to, so I get 13.
And remember, since they're lengths, you only take the positive.
Or I'm terrible at explaining things sometimes too, so.
Easy, right? Right triangle trigonometry? Easy. A is an acute angle. Sine of A is 2x over 3. Determine the values of the remaining functions. I smell rubbing alcohol.
I'm not using a ruler.
Yeah, I'm too lazy. What do we know? Which leg is the opposite? So the height, right?
Yeah,
What is it? What's the length of the height? And what's the hypotenuse? What's the missing leg? Which is what?
nine minus 4x squared. Equal to B.
What's cosine?
Nine minus 4x squared. For 3.
What's tangent? Secant.
Three over the mess.
What's the mess?
That's square root.
Because I don't see a mess in there.
Yeah, I know. Well,
Look at that 9. Who doesn't want to see that?
Rather see 6.
3 over 2x.
6 is a much sexier number. Cotangent. Who plans on advancing to Calc 2? Nobody's taking Calc 2. That's a bummer. That makes me sad. That makes me sad.
Statistics.
Makes me very sad. No one's going to be taking Calc 2.
What grade do you need to get to pass this class?
Fine pass.
To advance to calculus?
Technically a D,
A D?
I believe.
It's something different.
I don't know if they've changed it. Just it depends.
Does it depend on you or does it depend on the?
No, it depends on the department, whatever the department sets. Because I know at Rowan it's a C minus. At one of my other schools, it's a D. You just need to pass, which is technically a D.
you real quick, homework is 10% of the grade. Quiz average is 10% of the grade. There are 5 tests in all, and you chuck the lowest.
No, lowest is 5.
What? Oh, all 5 tests.
The lowest is 5%.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tests. The lowest is 5%.
I don't remember the exact breakdown.
Okay.
But it's broken down based on the scores.
The others.
RCBC. Brown College of Browns County. But the D doesn't transfer.
Then you have to take the class over again over there. So what if we said, yes, we have to take Cal 2?
You're gonna be seeing this a lot. Yep. Not really. It's just getting to that point that's
Oh, getting to
Different.
that point, yeah. To be able to put this, 'cause there's steps.
A is acute. Tangent of A is X. Want the other values.
Yeah. Planning. Oh, and detamine. Determine.
All right, now it might just be your computer. It might not be you.
I see no typos.
Hmm.
You can't prove it. You can't prove it.
We go back to the video.
I'll just delete it.
I have it recorded.
No, you don't. There's no one in here.
I have, like record your screen on the iPhone.
Yeah, there's no one else in the meeting. Nice try.
Get a scare out of you.
I'll also just shank you.
Oh, shit.
No witnesses.
Yeah,
Remember, I'm a,
'cause then you have to shank them too.
I'm a dictator. Do they have the evidence? Only you had the evidence.
And then he'll make that noise with me.
I'm a dictator.
Oh,
You always make that noise.
I'm a dictator. What do we know?
Jason.
Which one's the opposite? So what is the height? What's the adjacent, the base? What is hypotenuse?
Square plus one. Quantity x squared, quantity x squared plus one.
Sine.
X over the square root.
Cosine. Oops, I don't know why I did B.
X squared plus.
Secant.
Squared plus one.
Cosecant.
X squared plus 1 over X.
Cotangent. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. You have to get shanked anyway for calling my son's head big.
I'm so sorry.
Actually, that's a fate worse than shanking. Death by paper cut. When the sun is 20 degrees above the horizon, how long is the shadow cast by a building 50 meters high? Let's say there is a building. Just say there's the sun. Say that's the shadow. Right, we want how long is that shadow? Can easily represent this as a right triangle. We know the height. What else do we know?
That the angle is 20 degrees.
What angle? There's two of
For
them.
the shadow. Yeah, the A, the hypotenuse. That one.
This one?
Yes.
That is 20 degrees. It's called the length of the shadow. You know, I'm going to call it L for length. What is the relation we're going to wind up using?
Calculator to find the tangent of 20 degrees.
So how does that help?
Well, because you know tangent is going to be 50 over L.
That's what I'm looking for. Except I don't like that relation.
You don't like degrees, you like radians.
No, because I don't want L in the denominator. Cotangent of 20 degrees is L over 50. Which means that L is 50 times the cotangent of 20 degrees meters. By the way, since it doesn't specify to approximate, because cotangent of 20 degrees, you can't evaluate yet without a calculator. Meters.
So that's L,
Mhm.
and then whatever.
That's the length of the shadow.
So that's the answer, because they didn't tell us to approximate. But if they had approximate, we had to put it in a decimal.
Yes.
And how much will we, what is this still the 386 pins?
I'd specify.
Specify.
If I want an approximation, I'd tell you how far out I want you to go. It's about 137.37 meters.
This calculator, this TI-84 doesn't have it only has sine, cosine, tangent on it?
You may have to search for the other ones.
Or you just do those to the -1 power and flip them over, right? To find the,
I wouldn't do -1. That may give you the inverse.
oh,
1 over.
Oh, so that's why it binds the sin, cosine, the tangent, and then the sins.
Yeah, you may have to go in the library if you want cotangent. You may have to actually go searching for it. It should have it, just not conveniently placed.
In one of the settings here. What are you saying in the library?
Probably under math. Either math or you have to go to the catalog. Are you in the right mode?
oh. I want to be in,
Degrees.
oh, thank you.
Oh, I don't. You know,
Questions on right triangle trigonometry?
Oh, that makes, yeah, ow. That makes sense. Oh,
Because really, right triangle trigonometry is very similar to trig in the plane. In fact, it is trig in the plane just in the first quadrant, so we already did that. Reminder, there is no meeting on Wednesday. Instead, I will post I will have the assignment post on Wednesday at 3:30 for properties of the trig functions, like rest of the trig functions. I will also post a quiz that will post at 3:30. I'll have it due by 5:20, so it gives you the entire class period. Get on and work on it. Probably make it a 20-minute time limit. I'll probably post it on Teams.
The time.
so do it, PDF it, send it back.
Or JPEG for this, that's fine. It's going to be a form. So you'll just attach the picture onto the form. And you should, depending on how I do it, you should get an alert when it goes up.
Yeah, I need to send them mine, so I need to forget it. Then I was, 25, and I didn't
So I will see everyone again on Monday, where we will look at inverse trig functions, which, by the way, will also conclude Unit 4. Monday will conclude Unit 4, and then Wednesday we start my favorite analytic, trigonometry.
You too, take care.
Take-